that excuse is eroding. People were sort of worn down by it. The Bush administration kind of used that one as best they could, certainly. But in such a situation, it's, I think, always a big risk that you could have another event like that. And of course, they'll always be shrouded in the same type of mystery as they always are.
Right. So when there's a paper written by scientists from across the globe, Niels Harrit, Dr. Stephen Jones, and others, a peer-reviewed paper essentially proving that there's thermetic material in the dust from the buildings that collapsed. This has been shown to be a form of nanothermite.
A military-grade explosive.
Yeah, and Kevin Ryan wrote a paper about the top 10 connections between NIST and nanothermites, which is one of the most incredible papers. But you're not going to get this information from our mainstream media. And I think it's,
of course not.
It's because this mainstream media is so controlled, and they've done an excellent job of turning the truth tellers into nuts and having the psychopathic nuts be enshrined as patriots. And that's the most absurd part about this whole thing, isn't it?
It really is, and that goes to every, not simply 9/11, not simply the Bilderberg Group, but every facet of our society. The media are truly nothing in this current world, in the process of globalization, in our social, economic, and political structures. None of this would be possible without the participation and complicity of the media. And it's not merely an act of omission on their part. There's strategies of disinformation, of misinforming. There's various propaganda models they employ. There's, for example, one propaganda model in terms of foreign conflicts that no doubt the United States and other Western powers are involved in. This rings true throughout the entire Cold War and up to present day, and arguably much longer. But there's this idea of worthy versus unworthy victims. So in a foreign conflict, you define the worthy victims, and then you focus all attention on them. And unworthy victims, you essentially dehumanize, justify their deaths, or just ignore it altogether. So, for example, Palestinian-Israeli conflict, worthy victims are obviously Israelis. Even Israeli soldiers in occupied territories, they're worthy. Unworthy victims are Palestinians. Their deaths are justified or just not covered at all. They're just covered as statistics. Whereas if a soldier dies in occupied territory, you hear what his name is, his family, his dreams, hopes, ambitions, etc. If you take the current conflict in Libya, the rebels are the worthy victims. The black Libyan populations that they have been ethnically cleansing with our help and arms and aid and intelligence support, they're unworthy victims. So we don't talk about them. Or we call them mercenaries, even though that was proven to be a lie. So thereby justifying their deaths. This has been a tactic that has been done for decades, and the media really has it down to a science in terms of how they approach and do this and undertake their so-called analysis of world events. But it's a very specific model, and it's highly effective, and it's institutionalized.
It's highly effective on an uninformed population, and there's the rub, because if we had an informed population, it really wouldn't stand for any of this, because the lies and the misdirection and the half-truths are so evident now that you literally need to be a sleepwalker if you don't get it. I mean, because it doesn't matter which president we get, the wars continue. It doesn't matter which president we get, the bankers get bailouts. It doesn't matter which president we get, 9/11 will not be looked at. So at the crux of it is that we really live in a dumbed-down society, but that's my commentary for this call. Let me ask you about this. As we see the Swiss franc essentially be devalued by 10%, so the Swiss are now going to link their previously as good as gold currency, which it really isn't. It wasn't good as gold since 2006, and the IMF made the Swiss sell their gold and silver, and now we know why, so they could do this. But now that we're seeing fiat currencies under stress around the entire globe in this race to the bottom, I know that you would love to see the euro and the European Union and this European Union experiment fail, and so would I. What do you think the chances are that it will? And if it does, what does that spell for our future?
I have to say that I don't think the euro will fail. I think it should, and by any reasonable logic, it ought to. And it really seems to be inevitable consequence. However, I think that there's simply too much powerful invested interest behind the euro. I mean, that was a plan, speaking of the Bilderberg Group, that dates back to their second meeting in 1955, where they discussed the creation of a common currency. The chairman of the Bilderberg Group, Etienne Davignon, even said in 2009 that the euro was debated and discussed at Bilderberg. So it's been, and the European Union itself was a product of the Bilderberg Group. It was one of the reasons they were formed, to advance that. So I don't think that, I think they'll try and do everything they can, the elites, European elites, Bilderberg elites, global elites, etc. They're all part of the same network. They'll do everything they can to ensure that the euro and the European Union survive. And if you look at what they're discussing, at what they're planning for, and what they're talking about publicly, it's not to disband the euro, deinstitutionalize or break up the Eurozone or European Union. It's actually all about using this crisis as an opportunity. And it's about the recommendations in terms of the debt crisis are to create an economic government of Europe. And this would imply we need a sort of European treasury, which would essentially have veto power over all the finances and expenditures and taxes of all European governments to, quote, get them in line, to manage their finances, etc. So they're going for a power grab. It's not, they don't want to lose the euro. They want to extend their power. And that's certainly what they're going to try to do. However, there is always, in a crisis may be an opportunity for them, but it's also an opportunity for people. You see the crisis creating major social unrest, an explosion of social movements. The IMF itself warned last year that the economic crisis will bring an explosion of social unrest in Western industrialized countries. So they're not unaware of these things taking place, but you see the major anti-austerity protests in Italy just this week, obviously in Greece and Spain. So you see the people reacting. So a power grab will not necessarily be welcomed with open arms by the people, but then again, that's why the state is there with its oppressive apparatus of police and military to crush resistance, just as the states all across the Third World, Africa, Asia, Latin America, have done for the past several decades. When the IMF and World Bank went in with their structural adjustment programs and fiscal austerity packages, the people would protest because fiscal austerity and structural adjustment are just fancy economic lingo for social genocide.
Right.
And the people obviously resist, rise up, protest, riot, rebel, revolt, etc. And the state is there inevitably to crush them, break the resistance, and keep them oppressed while a tiny elite profits and integrates with a global elite system. And now they're just simply doing the same thing that they've done for the past several decades to Africa, Asia, Latin America. Now they're doing it to us.
Yes.
And I think that this will be, it's not a rosy or a hopeful situation by any means, but in a sense, I also think that it's inevitable that good will come out of this, because, as you said, the general population is brainwashed. They really don't understand the world. It's amazing, in a Western country, people have such little knowledge about their own government, about the true nature of their government, what it does around the world, whose interests it serves. You're more likely to get a realistic and accurate assessment of, say, the American government from people in Africa, Asia, Latin America than you are from Americans. And that really says something about our culture and our society. But as this system is turned in on us within the West, as we stop having our comforts of this system, the debt-based middle class, etc., consumer society, as these comforts vanish, we will be faced with the true blunt nature of our own states, and we'll actually start to see our governments and these Western institutions and ideologies for what they truly are, as imperialistic, power-mad, empire-building institutions. And only when the people in the West are able to come to that realization and, in fact, achieve a sense of solidarity with people everywhere, and by everywhere else I mean, the rest of the world, who have known this for several decades, if not centuries. They've been subjected to this brutal force on the part of the European empires and the Western empires over the past 500 years. So people elsewhere are generally more aware of this type of system, but only when we become aware of this can we start to interact on a mutual basis with people elsewhere, not seeing Africans or Asians or Latin Americans through the eyes or lenses of power. So not seeing them through our corporate-dominated media, not through our government voice boxes, not through our academic institutions or think tanks, but on a person-to-person basis.
Yeah, as real human beings.
As real individuals. And that's only possible because of the communications and technological revolutions where we can actually communicate with these people.
And they are moving us towards a banker government. They're moving us towards a one-world government, and they're moving us more and more towards tyranny. They're trying to strip us of our sovereignty. And to finish that David Rockefeller quote that I cited earlier, he finishes up by saying, quote, "The supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national autodetermination practiced in past centuries." So it is their stated goal to strip the sovereignty of nation-states across the world and to enslave us in their debt-based fiat money systems. And the only hope for humanity is if we do wake up in the West, and if we do stand up for truth, and if we do say, hey, dropping bombs on Libya makes no sense, so let's stop doing it. Just as it made no sense in Iraq, just as it made no sense in Afghanistan, all of which were based on the lie of 9/11, and that the American people bought hook, line, and sinker. And it's really time for people to wake up, and that's why we're doing this interview, trying to get this information out. Now, before I let you go, I just want to ask you about the world power structure. I tend to, and I think a lot of people do who study this, kind of put the Rothschilds at the top. But then I get emails from readers that say, we never hear about the Vatican. The Vatican has immense power. The Vatican's at the top. Is it as sprinkled out and as various and as shared as the Bilderberg Group structure might suggest? Or is there kind of a power structure at the top?
I think that in terms of identifying the specific individuals or the specific institution at the top is not only impossible, unless, of course, you're sitting there, but it's ultimately, I think, a little more irrelevant in terms of understanding the true nature of this system, because this system wasn't created by the Rothschilds. It wasn't created by the Rockefellers. It wasn't created by the Vatican. It wasn't created by a single bank or a single person. These people, these bankers, these oligarchs, global oligarchs, they emerged out of this system itself. The Rothschilds emerged out of a Jewish ghetto in Germany. They didn't found the central banking system. They made their way into it. The central banking system goes back to the 1600s, late 1600s. So it was there was ideas. I think that what's at the top is ultimately ideas, and it's how ideas become institutionalized. Now, certainly, people rise up and take power and implement and institutionalize their ideas and their visions, but the system predates these people. I think there's major ideas, the idea of the nation state, again, also from the 1600s, the central banking system from the 1600s, and the very idea of race itself, also from the 1600s, became a legal concept. These ideas sort of pervaded the system over the next 400 plus years. So I think it's more important to look at what created these people rather than where they specifically sit, because ultimately they're not going to sit there forever. There will be somebody else at some other time. They're never eternal and forever. Hawthorne once said, families are always rising and falling in America. And indeed, that's the case in the world. And you'll see families that come up to power and control this system. But I think that the truth of what holds the most power is the idea. All we need is ideas to challenge it, because ideas are incredibly powerful. I forget who said, nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. Victor Hugo, he said that. And indeed, that's true. It's the idea that all that is needed to counter and essentially make this system crumble is an idea.
Yeah, the idea of liberty, the idea of personal sovereignty as a human being. I won't get into silver and gold here, but that's why I encourage people to buy physical silver and gold, because it's your way of opting out of a criminal system. It's your way of expressing your outrage. It's your way of saying, I've had enough. I'm not going to be a part of this system anymore. And I think it's a great way to try to shelter ourselves from certainly an economic storm, which appears to only be getting worse and worse and coming our way. Hey, are there any websites that you would want to steer people toward as it pertains to 9/11 research? I like the Journal of 9/11 Studies, so that's one I would recommend people check out. And certainly Globalresearch.ca has done numerous articles on the subject.
I've written several articles on the subject, which you can get on my site, andrewgavinmarshall.com. And the ones you mentioned are also excellent. There's tons of sources and information. Sybil Edmonds' blog, Boiling Frog's post.
Architects and Engineers, the Richard Gage's website for 9/11 Truth, absolutely. Well, this has really been an enlightening conversation, and you're just such a measured, intelligent person. I just really am grateful for the time. So thank you for spending it. Okay, so Andrew Gavin Marshall, people can check you out at andrewgavinmarshall.com. You're an independent researcher and writer, a truth teller, and an all-around good guy. So we really appreciate it, man. Thanks for your time.
Thanks very much for having me.
I hope we can talk again in the future. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
Okay, take care, man.
Cheers.
Bye.
Well, friends, thanks for tuning in, and be sure to check out sgtreport.com for all the latest. Good night.